Module 6 is about the role of government in the economy, and this is a very controversial area. Now, there are areas where everybody agrees. I think everybody agrees that government should provide national defense. There's too much of a free rider problem that they talk about in the book. And, there are certain roles. Public goods and externalities and market concentration are all areas where government really little dispute where government should get involved there and set the rules. So where things get controversial is how much government should play in the game. It's one thing to referee the game; it's another to start playing in the game. So I mean, how many times have you seen a referee in a football game make a block or a tackle? Okay, so no, they're there to try to just enforce the rules, not to actually play in the game. So. Uh, Actually, not much government, as the book points out, in the economy. It was believed that government shouldn't be in the economy at all. Really, it just wasn't their thing. That was all left to the private sector. And after the Great Depression, I should say during the Great Depression, once the stock market crashed in 1929, President Roosevelt's New Deal helped greatly with getting people giving them relief. People had lost their jobs. I mean, the economy had crashed. The price level had fallen. The GDP had fallen, and big hits. Unemployment had gone up to 25%. So, dramatic action was needed. Now, President Roosevelt, it's been said that to say he had no interest in economics was an understatement. He had negative interest in economics. Okay, he didn't know anything about it, didn't want to know anything about it. But anyway, he did great things with helping people suffering who had lost their jobs and needed assistance. But much of what he did gets a much lower grade as far as economic stimulus. In fact, the Great Depression lasted far longer than it needed to. Every time the economy started to come back, they'd slap on some regulation and push it back down again. In fact, it didn't the Great Depression didn't really end until World War II. Massive spending for the war effort. Now, our textbook author says, I don't know if it's a mistake or a typo, but he says the Great Depression ended and then World War II. Well, not really. The unemployment was still quite high when World War II started, and it was that massive spending. And that was the spending that John Maynard Keynes, when he met with Roosevelt, tried to encourage him to do. And anyway, that's what we got out of World War II, and then that's what brought the Great Depression to an end. Well, speaking of typos or whatever, if you look into the appendix, you will see a section called Delving Deeper into Macroeconomics. That should say delving deeper into microeconomics. Everything, and then everything it says after that is microeconomics. So everything we've done in the course is microeconomics, if you want to know. Now, the next chapter in the book is starting on macroeconomics, but the appendix is on micro. It's delving deeper into microeconomics. We're not going to cover the appendix, okay? So don't worry about the appendix. That's one reason I bring it up. So don't worry about the appendix. We're not going to go into that. But what we are going to do is we're going to skip over all the macroeconomic stuff, which begins in the next chapter. If you want to take a macroeconomics course, we offer them. Economics 203 is a course in macroeconomics. But this course is in economic issues. So we're staying with that. And you had to learn a little bit of microeconomics to understand any economics. All economics is grounded in microeconomics. In fact, in our macroeconomics class, we have to spend 2 or 3 chapters on microeconomics just so you can understand the macro. So everything's grounded in microeconomics. Okay, well, the lectures. So we've got a lot of stuff here. Here's a parable of equality and efficiency. It really explains why socialist countries. Now, this chapter really doesn't get into economic systems, but it's closest we're going to get. Why are socialist countries so poor? Well, that explains it right there, actually. And here's the 2000 real estate bubbles in the 2000s came from, here's the thing, and the book does talk about redistribution of income. When politicians want to redistribute income and help the poor, which is great, sometimes they go a little too far. And when they went too far was they oftentimes they think they're helping by making credit more accessible. You're really not doing people a favor by getting them into debt. People who can't pay shouldn't be getting into debt. So you're not helping them by making it easier to get into the debt. So what they did is they pressured or released lending standards for mortgages, lowered them. People who really couldn't qualify for loans now were qualifying, easily qualifying. And you know what? As soon as times got bad, they couldn't pay, and the houses went on the market, defaulted. So this talks a little bit about that. A lot of video lectures here. Okay, interesting. Short video. In Nashville, they've got a minimum limousine price law. Is that really the function of government? Okay, is that an externality? Is it what is it? A public good? No, it's helping their buddies. It's helping their buddies who own limousine companies. It's protecting them against low price competition. And that really something government should be doing? Well, that's just a few minutes. Here's another one, price gouging. On the surface, that sounds like the most intuitive thing in the world is to have a law against price gouging. That is when an area is hit with a natural disaster that suppliers can't raise prices and to take advantage of those that disaster and people in need. On the other hand, if you don't allow prices to adjust, you're hurting more than helping. You're keeping those resources from coming in. The best way to get those resources in is let the prices adjust. You can't keep prices the same. They can't. They've been wiped out. You can't consume the same. You're going to have shortages, and the only way to ration, you know what? If you don't let prices ration, you got to let some other way of rationing. But the fastest way to get things in there, like generators and food, is through letting those prices rise. As you watch this, another short one, it talks about how in Mississippi, they actually arrested a guy for bringing in generators. The people wanted generators, desperately wanted generators. They didn't get them because they arrested the guy taking them down there to them. Okay. And I talk about, I've mentioned it before, the economic illiteracy of so many of our politicians is enough to get us to pull our hair out. Here's competition, deregulation in the airline industry. He talks about that in the chapter. A little Paul Solomon video, very entertaining. The airline industry was completely regulated when it started because it was such an important, back in the 1930s, it was such an important industry that they wanted to make sure it succeeded. So they set the routes, they set the prices, but they got a little out of control because airlines, they couldn't compete with each other. They used to compete based on advertising, really. But they used to compete with the food on the planes. So some they couldn't compete on price because the government set the price, but they would say, well, we've got the best meals. And so government started, believe it or not, regulating the size of the sandwiches. Well, that was undone in the 70s. President Carter deregulated that and let competition be more of a factor there. Private property. Now we get into a little bit of economic system. Private property, the Pilgrims, as I talk about in the article, says why socialist countries are so poor, talks about the Pilgrims. basically had a collective system there and almost starved because the incentives to be productive were removed. When they removed those, uh, when they instigated private property, productivity increased so much they actually had food to export, where they were nearly starving before. And that's the problem right there. You get rid of the incentives to be productive, and you're going to have a low standard of living. Capitalism versus socialism, very interesting. Paul Solman goes to Cuba and has some interesting experiences down there. And Sweden was a socialist, essentially a socialist country in the 1970s and 80s, nearly went broke, had to restructure, lowered taxes, and they privatized industries. And today, they're one of a very solid example of a dynamic capitalist economy. And a Swedish historian and economist put together this movie here, played on PBS a while ago. And here's an interview with him, um, if you want a short version. But for some reason, the belief that Sweden is still socialist is out there, and that's puzzling to many people, including myself. But they're in many ways more capitalist than we are, as they point out in this movie, as far as regulations go on innovation and so forth. All right. Well, there's a lot there, I know, and hang in there. I know it's getting rough. There's a lot to do each day. So we'll see you back here for Module 7.